Yes. What is up, everybody? And welcome to another exciting installment of the Qué Golazo podcast with the U.S. men's national team slants. Now, there are 6 qualifying windows throughout this last phase to qualify for the World Cup in December in Qatar. And we're done with 5 of them. But we have one big one left. So with the benefits of a night's sleep to gather our senses, 2 of your favorite former U.S. men's national team players, well, we're going to be reflecting on what we saw in these last 3 games in this last window to see what we learned about each of the teams, and in particular, the U.S. men's national team. The Qué Golazo podcast begins right now, everybody. Let's get after it. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside the most handsome. Sorry, I was like, do I say second most handsome or the most handsome? Most handsome teammate right. I've ever had, Hollywood Heath Pearce. Heath, how are you feeling, first and foremost? And let's just start with the U.S. very quickly. Are you as excited about the result as you were right after the game? Has anything changed for you? Where are you especially after seeing Greg Berhalter's comments? Nothing too controversial like we saw after Canada, but anything there that stands out for you?
No, it was a professional performance. You know, after reflecting overnight, I realized that it's not going to be every game that we play teams off the pitch or break them down. We can't control who we're playing against. We can't control the opponent. The U.S. recognized very early on that this was a very disorganized team, a team in disarray, and I think they capitalized on that pretty regularly throughout the game, finding gaps. The passing was good. The movement was good. The ideas were good. The execution of those ideas were good. Having said that, Jimmy, we've talked about this already, but they didn't score in the run of play. I mean, even though there was a lot of flow, and I do think some of those set pieces, they came from dangerous positions. They came from spots that were created in the run of play. So I think overall, they took what the game gave them. They played very, very well. I think everybody was at least above average, if not higher, in this game.
Right.
Take away the opponent. I think the U.S. approached the game the right way and under pressure. Let's not devalue the fact that we were all nervous before the game and they were playing against a Honduras side that are down and out of this competition, a coach that doesn't want to play. So to look back on that and know that there was some pressure, there was a little bit of reason for fear, and they stepped up to this game. They handled the business, and now they're just probably 3 points away from qualifying for a World Cup. I don't know what your thoughts were. If you feel any different.
I mean, when I listen to you speak, execution is the word that stood out for me, because maybe that was something that was lacking. And yes, we could say in the run of play, there are some frustrations, and maybe it's not as flowing or free-flowing as we would like. But we still got in good positions to draw fouls. And with those fouls, we took advantage of it with 3 set-piece goals, or we got corner kicks or whatever it is. That's still evidence of us doing something positive in the run of play. And then we just have to your point, execute when we get those opportunities to take advantage of it. And we weren't doing that with any effect in the first 10 games. So it's nice to see that we kind of broke our duck, I would say, in a pretty important game, and long may that continue in the next window just so we can qualify. I also believe that we're 3 points away, and it's going to potentially get a little dicey here. We're going to get into that in a second. So let's pivot over to Mexico versus Panama. And just so everybody knows, we will get to our takeaways for the U.S. men's national team, our 3 positive takeaways of what we saw in this window and our 3 negative takeaways. And maybe there's an overall theme or 2 we can get into as well. But let's talk about Mexico-Panama. That game was going on during our recap. Mexico squeaks it out, a 1-0 result, a big one for them. Raul Jimenez ends up getting a penalty. He missed a sitter or 2 in this game, so I'm sure he probably felt pretty relieved that he got on the score sheet and provided a big 3 points for Mexico. Diego Lainez ended up drawing the penalty. I sometimes wonder what defenders are thinking when you got a little guy that knows how to dribble in the box, and why you don't just move your feet instead of trying to reach. These guys are very good at that. Part of me's like, it's kind of soft, but also the guy did get him, and you would call that a foul anywhere else on the field. So, it is what it is. I thought Mexico created enough chances to win that game. They did, but that wasn't a goal in the run of play either. They seem to be struggling a little bit as well. What do you think this result means for, let's say, the psychology of Mexico, maybe even in particular, the head coach, Tata Martino?
Yeah, I think Tata Martino's relieved first and foremost, right? I mean, his job is just as much on the line as every other manager in this octagonal, so to speak. And so to get that result, obviously Panama are very good. They're young, they're athletic, they're sort of long. They cover a lot of space on the field. They had their chances against Mexico as well. They're a pretty exciting team to watch, all things considered. But like you said, anytime they're going to lunge like that in the box, you're putting the ref in a tough position. And with VAR, I was shocked that didn't even go sort of like a re-review, because you could just sort of see that there's contact, especially after it was a little bit of a scuffle in there. Eric Davis and him are on the ground, and then you come lunging in from behind. You just,
Did you see the ref? I love the ref. It's so dramatic. His call to the penalty spot was just like, I know it.
Yeah.
Like that's so assertive. And the fact that he didn't look at it was pretty funny. Also, on the tackle by Eric Davis, that was still stud showing coming right through the ball. And I actually thought, whoa, was that when I saw it in real time, like maybe that's what they called? Because he came in pretty reckless, and the other guy came in, and they just needed a little bit more discipline. But I will say, in those games against Mexico, you have to be switched on. And the whole game, they'll take advantage of any of these little things. And they did actually against Panama. Just didn't finish.
It was end to end, dude. The game was end to end on both sides. It was pretty exciting game in terms of, even though it was a low scoring affair, Mexico had plenty of chances. They were attacking pretty dynamically. And Panama on the other side too. They'd spring out on the counter and create some decent looks in the run of play. And so overall, I mean, Panama just seemed, and now with Costa Rica just sort of standing right behind them in the standings and points, I think there's just 1 point off. It just makes me worry about this Panamanian side, who I think has been fantastic. And my surprise, obviously Costa Rica are the biggest surprise now, knowing that they've sort of clawed their way back into this. But yeah, you can see there 17 points for Panama, 16 for Costa Rica. I'm worried about Panama, because when you see the way they play, they matched up well against Mexico. And I think their style of play, the quality of players that they have, they certainly seem better than any of the other opponents that we've faced outside of, El Salvador, Jamaica, and Honduras.
All right, we're going to get into the remaining games here in a second, but I want to talk about now the psychology of the fans, because even though El Tri got 7 points, they went to Jamaica and came back from a goal down, but were a man up to win 2-1 very late in that one. 0-0 draw against Costa Rica, and now squeaking by Panama here, 1-0. 7 points, not really that convincing, though. Not really that convincing. Fans still want Tata Martino out. And I feel like we're going to get into this in terms of one of our takeaways, but Mexico seemed to be feeling similar vibes to us, where maybe we're doing just enough, but the fans still aren't happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fans continue to be unsatisfied by the way in which they're getting results. If you were to say, like we talk about, you go into every window, you say 7 points at a minimum. 7 points is a lot, especially considering they're not a team in great form right now. When I think about the U.S., I'm like, 7 points is a lot for the U.S. to get, considering we have to play away from home in this window. Obviously, I think we would match up well against Canada, but Canada are in peak form. The best form I've seen of a team in Concacaf history. Maybe Mexico have had runs like that in the past, but I don't remember the U.S. ever having, obviously with these are triple fixture dates and very different in the way that you're playing. You're playing more games, 14 games total. But I don't remember the U.S. ever going on a run of that many consecutive results and wins to really set themselves up for a World Cup. And in Mexico, like you said, I think the nervousness is still there. Just like, hey, I think we're going to qualify for a World Cup, but I'm worried about where we're at as a team. I'm worried about how we're going to be dangerous in the World Cup. I'm worried about, like, are we relying too heavily on luck? Or, what? It doesn't seem convincing. Like, what is the way we are going to win over and over again? In Mexico, even though they do attack and it is an exciting style of play, if you're the Mexican fan, you say, yeah, but the same thing. We get into the final third and we're not creating a ton of chances. They're not clear cut. We're missing ideas. The rhythm doesn't seem there. And then overall, they're vulnerable in transition. They're vulnerable defensively. Right. And so, yeah, I get it why FMF fans are sort of in the same place that U.S. men's national team fans are.
Well, I have two things about this particular game, Heath Pearce. One of note is Chucky Lozano apparently dislocated his shoulder, so he could be out for 2 months. That's
that was pretty ugly. He looked in a lot of pain.
I dislocated my shoulder back in the day playing.
What have you not done, Jimmy? What have you not done?
You know what? I didn't hurt my ankles or my knees. I didn't have the traditional injuries. I didn't tear an ACL or an MCL or a meniscus. I didn't, an Achilles or none of that stuff, but I broke my foot, broke my face. I don't know how many times, dislocated shoulders. I've got everything else covered. So that's a big loss for them. And it ties into what I'm going to say next, because Tecatito came off the bench in 2 games. And when he came off the bench, he was fantastic. And when he started the middle game against Costa Rica, not that he wasn't good, he just didn't have the same type of impact. And I think we're getting similar vibes from Christian Pulisic in some capacity. And I wonder how Tecatito feels about that. Now, with Chucky Lozano out, most likely for a significant part of time, which Mexico is going to qualify. Maybe. I'm just kidding. They're going to qualify. Maybe. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see how Tata Martino at least handles that through the next window, which leads me into the remaining games. Mexico play at home to us, and away to Honduras, which should be relatively easy, and then home to El Salvador. I mean, those last two games are in stark contrast to what we have to do, because we play away to Mexico, home to Panama, and away to Costa Rica, which is a very difficult window. Yep. Panama, speaking of them, they play home to Honduras. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on this. Honduras home, so they're going to walk them, away to us, and then home to Canada. So the home to Honduras, if they get all 3 points and we go down to Mexico City and get a draw, that puts all of us, or Mexico and U.S., at 22 points and Panama on 20, which is very real that could happen. Now, we have the great benefit of playing Panama at home the next one, but that game becomes so incredibly important. A draw should be enough. I don't even know if I want to leave it to a draw, but we need to get a win in that game. So it's in our hands. No matter what happens in the Mexico game, it's still in our hands if we just beat Panama. But that gets a little bit dicey. And then they're going to be at home to Canada, who will have already qualified at that point. So who are they actually going to roll out? And, and we have to go down to Costa Rica to get a result. It's still... Yikes, dude. That's what I'm saying. But so I bring up this USA game, and I know we'll obviously have a big preview around this whole thing. But just as it pertains to this window, Mexico 0-0 at home, and then barely beat Panama. And as you said, it was a pretty wide open game. Canada's already gone down there and gotten a result. Jamaica almost did in the first one. Estadio Azteca doesn't seem as daunting as maybe it once was. Do you feel the same way? Or is it just because there's not a lot of fans in the stadium right now because they're not allowed to be in there?
Yeah, look, Jimmy, I think obviously the lack of crowd size there, I think the time of year, just in terms of playing in Azteca in the summer when it's hot and humid and all those things play a factor. I think the state of this Mexican national team in terms of their form and what they're in, I think going back to the 3 games this year last year that we beat Mexico, I think all of those things play into a factor of maybe a shifting of the tides, or at least in this time capsule that we're living in, not being as much of a fortress or a difficult place to play. And we've seen other teams now go down there. So take U.S. out of this. We've seen other teams go down there and at least compete and not feel played off the pitch. If you remember Mexico and Azteca in the past, they used to run you off the pitch. By the 60th minute, you were done. And they were just leaning on you and poking you and prodding you. And we're going to just sort of like a bullfight, eventually take you down. And so I think the odds of the U.S. going down there and getting a result are great. But it still comes down to me that U.S. against Panama at home being the one where you control your destiny. And of course, you want to tee yourself up with a little bit of more buffer or room for error, because, we saw when the U.S. went and had to play Costa Rica and New York in that last qualifying campaign, a game that we expected them to win, and they got battered in that game and completely dominated in a really poor performance. So you don't want to leave it down to a head-to-head, because we talk about that being in CONCACAF for that 4th place qualifier. You don't want that to be a one-off match. So, yeah, I don't know if your take is different than that in terms of the U.S.'s chances or odds or just the ability to go down to Azteca and get a point at this moment.
No, my take is exactly the same. So I have March 24th circled on my calendar, everybody. That's when the United States face Mexico in Mexico City. It is going to be a tasty affair, and I assume is going to set us up to have a little bit of drama heading into the next game against Panama on March 27th. And hopefully we have nothing to play for, but celebrations when we go down to Costa Rica to play the Ticos. So let's talk about Canada, though, because they had a perfect window, and I want to show them as much respect as we possibly can. 3 games, 3 2-0 wins, 9 points, 3 clean sheets, 4 points clear. Last 3 games away to Costa Rica, home to Jamaica, home or away to Panama. I mean, I feel like they should be lighting the cigars. What do you say? And what do you say about their game against El Salvador last night, where maybe they got a little bit lucky in some capacity? That goal by Atiba Hutchinson was crazy. El Salvador switched off and basically gave a throw into Jonathan David to have a breakaway, which was wild at the end.
That was crazy.
But with regard to the old cliche, better to be lucky than good, I believe that you create your own luck, and Canada has done that and done it consistently throughout this whole qualification phase.
Yeah, look, I mean, you go back to the Gold Cup, and I just keep going back to that. Remember, Jimmy, we were teasing John Herdman because his comments of like, we play everything like a final, and everybody's like, okay, dude, you said it enough. Like, we get it. But what he was doing was like sort of ingraining this mentality into the team that is now coming to fruition, right? You have all the quality players. They didn't have those then. So he's taken all those players that weren't top quality and saying, hey, here's the way in which we're going to go about getting results. And that's worked for them in qualifying. And like you said, you create your own luck. There's been games that Canada have had a chance to lose. You go back to the very first one. Honduras could have beat them in the opener. Right. And they've continued to get points, and they're the only team now that's left undefeated. They're 7 points clear of Panama at the moment. If they get a point, I think that puts them in. And so Panama would basically have to win out, considering the teams that they have to play just to go there. And so, maybe Canada's at risk of not finishing top of the table, or so to speak. But I think for them, a World Cup berth is a World Cup berth. And you look at the statistics that they've had, these unbeaten runs, getting 9 points in this window. They've checked all these kinds of boxes that they were to end up finishing second. So be it. But overall, I think I was actually shocked that they didn't party or celebrate more when they won that game, considering that they are knocking on the door. And maybe there's a humility of we're not quite there yet, so let's not rest on our laurels. But it'd be almost impossible for them to not make a World Cup at this point.
No, I agree. They play away to Costa Rica, as I mentioned, and that's going to be difficult because obviously Costa Rica has a ton to play for. I could see a draw there. It seems like a fun one there. But there's something about that home game against Jamaica where they could win that one to solidify it and to automatically qualify and celebrate with their home fans that I think would be very special. They're going to celebrate with their home fans no matter what, even if they win in Costa Rica. But it would be kind of cool to do it in that game. Now, speaking of Jamaica, they are dead and buried alongside El Salvador and Honduras. What kind of version of those three teams, Honduras, El Salvador, and Jamaica, what are we going to see from them in this next window, now that they've had some time to process the fact that they've been eliminated? Because El Salvador is having some strife between the federation and their own players. The Honduran coach has come out and said, basically, this is a shit show, and this chaos right now, and us beating them 3-0 didn't help that fact. And then you have El Salvador, who obviously I think, Panama's probably been one of the great surprises, but I've actually been pretty impressed with El Salvador as well in terms of their organization and how hard they've been ultimately to break down throughout this window, despite a couple of mistakes against Canada last night, where they seem to be getting punished for their mistakes, especially in the last games of windows. And I do think that's Canada playing them in the last game of window when they don't have a lot of depth has been nice and fortuitous for them to have that type of scheduling. Not making excises. Canada still got to go out and play.
We got Honduras at the end of their window, so
that's true. That's fair. Fair point. Fair point. I'll take all that back. I'm bringing that back.
But you are right. Both of those teams do lack that depth. So I think the not having the ability to have squad rotation. You talked about Diego Lainez, Tecatito Corona coming off the bench against Mexico. That's what you call depth, right?
Right.
And they have that. I think U.S., Canada, and Mexico sort of have that in riches right now.
So what do you think? What do you think their motivation is going to be? There's pride. These guys have played a long time. You might not ever get another World Cup qualifier like Maynor Figueroa, who's 38-year-old center back for captain of Honduras. This is going to be it for him. Do you even bother rolling that guy out anymore? Or why not just play your young guys? Or are you trying to respect the competition and rolling out your best team? And what do you expect from these countries that have already been eliminated?
Well, I think if there's things on the line for your opponent, I've played that at the club level where you want to be the spoiler. Your motivating factor is one, you're representing your country, your crest, right? So every time you go out there,
true,
you have to approach it in a certain way. But you can also spoil the party. You can be the Grinch who stole Christmas if you come in there and get results against these teams. If you can knock teams out and cause more chaos, that's what you want to do. It's a motivating factor. Obviously, you play for the win every time you play. You play to represent your country and the pride of your country. But there's also that factor of being the one that could spoil the party. So I expect them to come out with that type of mentality. Having said that, I don't know. I would have expected that against Honduras and against the U.S. I would have expected that Honduras, Panama. Not Panama, but El Salvador against Canada. But that didn't happen. So we're seeing a pretty big gap right now in terms of just the quality and depth of these teams. Not even form, right? Because we're talking about Mexico and U.S. not being in great form, but they're still getting results against these poor teams right now. And so I expect them to come out with that fight and passion. Jamaica's the main one that I'm interested in seeing how they roll out. Do they even bring in all their players? Just from a cost standpoint of traveling, there's just such a large commitment financially to bring players from all over the world. Obviously, El Salvador, Honduras have more domestic players. It's going to be a little bit easier, but for Jamaica, by and large, those players all play abroad. And so from just the financial standpoint, I don't know what the right or prudent thing to do is, considering that you're gonna have to bring all these players and you're already eliminated.
Yeah, it's interesting, and obviously we'll have more to pick at as we get closer to the previews. Again, that first game of that last qualifying window, March 24th, and the big one, at least the one that we care about the most, is U.S. heading to Mexico to take on the Mexican national team, El Tri. All right, now speaking of the U.S. men's national team, let's get into 3 takeaways, both positive and negative. Heath Pearce, you want to go one by one here for the U.S. men's national team throughout this window? You go first, and then I'll come in with mine, and we'll just go back and forth. We'll go positive first because we're positive guys. glass half full type guys. And then we'll tiptoe into the negative waters and see how warm it is and go from there. We're going to have a good time here. So Heath, take it away. What's your first positive takeaway from the U.S. men's national team in this window?
Yeah, that the U.S. The first positive takeaway is what we've already talked about. The U.S. found a way to get a result under immense pressure. Right, they left it late into the window where they needed to get a result against the team that was out, and it would be easy to flop or collapse in that type of environment. We saw that in 2018 when things were on the line. We weren't able to get those types of results, and so I think the U.S. just showing an ability to rise to the occasion is my first positive takeaway from this window. I don't know what your first one is.
Well, it's kind of similar. I think we're going to have probably some similar themes here, but I just want to remind everybody, and I guess my overall, if I had to pick one word, to be, I think we gained some perspective here, because prior to the Honduras game, okay, we had 18 points in 10 games. Now, in previous iterations of World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF, we only played 10 games. 18 points would have gotten you into the World Cup every single time we did the hexagonal. So I just want to throw that out there, that even with the loss to Canada and all that stuff, 18 points through 10 games would have booked our ticket to the World Cup. Now,
having said that, though, you've only played Costa Rica once. You've only played Mexico once. So like a little bit of that is a little bit
sure. It's a little misleading. It's a little misleading. I get it, but I still wanted to throw that in there. That
it's important.
It's important to just keep that in mind as your emotion maybe takes over your rationality. But when we look at the window, we beat the two teams that we needed to beat and that we should beat in terms of El Salvador and Honduras at home. We lost to the best team in CONCACAF. And our two losses overall, away to Canada and away to Panama, those are two pretty good teams. And our three draws, away to El Salvador with the first game, not easy. Away to Jamaica, never easy to go down there. And at home to Canada. Now, we had the lead in two of those three games against Jamaica and Canada. And I feel like that probably what hurts the most. Because if you look at those, if we had been down a goal and we came back and scored, like, whew, we got to draw, everybody. But because we had the leads in those, I also feel like it gives that narrative of something lost. And those are very difficult places to play. And obviously this Canada team is a generational. This is a golden generation here for Canada. So I guess perspective is one of my takeaways. And maybe this is more just talking to myself, that I don't want to get too out of control with the emotion. And even though I am pissed about a few things, we're still in a very, very good position to qualify. And that needs to be taken into consideration. All right. What's your next positive takeaway?
We're seeing X Factor players, right? We're seeing Walker Zimmerman step up in tough situations to lead the team in the back line. We're seeing Weston McKennie rise to the occasion. We're seeing the emergence of players like Timo Weah that could be relied upon and things like that. So I think just in terms of consistency in players, I know that's sort of a connective tissue back to my first theme, but I think we're starting to see some of these players emerge as our go-to guys moving forward.
Okay. Now I'm actually going to say pretty much the same thing, but say it different in how I wrote it down, because I was thinking about these last night. We don't need Christian Pulisic to win games was my really short one. Now, we learned that prior because he had that ankle injury that we had to figure out a way, and Brendan Aronson was one of the names that stepped up. Ricardo Pepi, still being influential. Now, obviously not like for like, not playing the same position because Gio Reyna's been out, but then Timo Weah, to your point, has also stepped up. Weston McKennie maybe taking on a little bit more responsibility. But what I find interesting was that he was out we couldn't rely on him. So you actually approach the game in a different way. But what happens when Christian Pulisic is actually playing and not playing well? How do we still figure out a way to win games when he's actually on the field and throwing up stinkers? So I thought that was important. I think that's a good sign that even if he's got an off day, we still have other players and off day and occupying a position. It's not like I said, not that somebody's not in his place. That we can still find a way to win and be successful, I thought is really important. Now, his mere presence is going to open up space for others. He's so highly marked and people are definitely keen on him. And that's something he's going to have to continue to get used to if he isn't already. But I just think that's a really good sign for the team overall, that even if Christian plays and isn't playing well, we can still have success. Oh,
I agree. And that leads me actually to my third USMNT takeaway is that while the players in the team aren't playing the way that we want them to play, I think we're continuing to show a pipeline of depth. Luca De La Torre being an example. Callum Acosta rising up and showing that he should be in this team. Reggie Cannon. And we're seeing sort of players step in and make things difficult for Greg Berhalter. And I think that depth, while again, like you said, you said this yesterday, and it was really interesting, is that we saw in national teams past or coaches past where it was the same guys over and over and over. Greg made 7 changes. Some of those were forced, some of those weren't. We obviously get frustrated when there's too many changes, but there's always a light at the end of the tunnel when we make those changes, and it works out, right? It shows that we're more deep than possible. We're not just going to go with the same exact, X's and O's every single time. And I think that's one, putting pressure on players. It's two, sort of developing sort of the bottom half of our players who might be the ones that step up come World Cup time. We're 12 months out, or say 10 months out from the start of a World Cup.
Yeah.
A lot can change in that window.
Right.
And the fact that we went from Brendan Aronson needing to be a sure starter to saying, oh, maybe Timo Weah should be the starter there. And who should be on the other side? Is it Jordan Morris or Christian Pulisic? Does she come inside? What happens when Gio Reyna comes back? I think these are good problems to have, even if 100%. We aren't playing at the best that we can at the moment.
No, I love that. I love that. Also, I guess this one, now that I read it out loud for my last positive takeaway, kind of ties into my first one.
Is it Greg Berhalter? Is it a Greg
no,
Berhalter take?
No, there's no Greg Berhalter, Air Jordan, hard to get Air Jordans or back passes or taking selfies with fans. It's we're not alone. And I actually find a great deal of comfort in knowing that Mexico feels like they're in the same boat as us, where they're clearly super talented. There's no denying how much talent they have on the field and when they play, but they're underperforming and something's not working. And this is with a manager in Tata Martino that we were all clamoring for, or at least should have been interviewed for the U.S. men's national team job and didn't get the opportunity to do so, even though he was interested in taking it over. So I don't know. I find some comfort in knowing that they're struggling and their fans are upset. And it's kind of, maybe, I don't know, maybe we don't want to be compared. We're different. We're the U.S., they're Mexico, whatever. But I actually find that this is satisfying to me because Tata's got his guys, and maybe this falls into Greg Berhalter as well. Greg's got his guys, and something's just not working with at all times. There's that lack of consistency. And to your point, to say something or to harken back to something you've said multiple times over the last week, let's say, is what is our identity? And are we better now than we were at the start of World Cup qualifying? And I've put a lot of thought into that. And I can't say unequivocally that we are better, even though I think we've learned more about this player pool. So I'm going to have to chew on that until our next episode of the U.S. Men's National Team Hour, which is dropping on Monday on 1:15 p.m., 4:15 p.m. Eastern. So those are my positive takeaways. Let's move over to the negative, even though we're not
I
negative.
feel like we should have started on negatives, because now
maybe we should have. I know. Now I feel bad.
I'm on the negatives.
Maybe we should have flip-flopped.
Yeah,
but let's go glass half empty. Let's obviously keep it fun. What do you got?
Yeah, for my first glass half empty, I would say very much in line with what you said. I think on the positive side, we're seeing this depth of these players. On the negative side, I think we're past this window, Jimmy, of like wholesale growth, right? It's like when you play a new sport and you have this instant gratification, right? We saw that with this team over the last couple of years. Instant gratification, young players, so exciting. And now we're into the minutia. We're into the small details that are going to make them go from good individuals and an okay team and an inconsistent team to a great team. And I think, like you said, it's tough to measure where we're at on that scale of how close are we to becoming a great team and how close are we to becoming just an average team with good players or great players on it. And I think that's the negative that I'm really confused about, of that identity of like how far away or how close for me. It's really hard for me to measure. And I'm assuming fans feel the same way, and wondering what you feel on that, and also what your first take, your glass half empty.
No. I mean, I like that shout a lot. The fine details, the finer points, and I mean, those are going to ultimately prove the difference as we look. You and I know that you play big games, and it's the finest of margins, right? It's a real thin line between success and failure, and we need to start getting over to the success side, I think, a little bit more consistently to appease us in particular, and obviously the fans. My first negative takeaway would be we're still struggling to score in the run of play. If we look at our opportunities throughout these three games, keeping this window in as the frame of reference, we needed a sloppy, broken play ultimately to score the game winner against El Salvador. Did we have plenty of chances in that game? We did, and I was happy about that. That's why I wasn't too worried about it, all things considered. But then when the Canada game came up, we just were a little bit safe and conservative and maybe didn't play with that risk and swagger that we did see ultimately against Honduras. Of course, keeping that opponent in mind, you can only play, as players, you can only play what's in front of you. So whether it's Honduras or whoever else, the guys went out there and did what they needed to do. And it was nice to see them have that confidence that we're looking at. Usually we say, that we call it the sauce, right? When guys are playing well with that type of confidence, they have sauce. They had frozen sauce last night, and it was nice to see how they did. But not scoring in the run of play is something to keep in mind, because I don't think it's going to be very easy to get too many good looks on goal in Mexico City. Panama is very organized in our next three games, so They're going to be tough at home, especially with so much to play for. When they know that they beat us, that is big trouble for us, a great problem for them. And then away to Costa Rica. Like, these are going to be, all three of these places are going to be very, very difficult to create problems in the run of play, which is why I'm excited we finally scored some set piece goals, because that could be where we prove the difference. But still, how do we, and not only that, because we are going to get a couple opportunities in every single game. Now we have to finish those opportunities, and that finishing obviously is a sign of scoring in the run of play as well.
Yeah, that's well said. I think, for my second glass half empty, I would say that this team of players. Actually, you know what, Jimmy? Let me take a step back. I don't want to lead you into my second. What's number two for you?
You want to go back to me, back to back? Okay. So you know how one of my positive takeaways was we don't need Christian Pulisic to win games. Well, my second negative takeaway is that we don't need Christian Pulisic to win games. He's our American Lord and Savior. So it's weird to think that there are calls to have him come off the bench as a super sub than to be actually our starter. I mean, could you imagine saying that at the start of qualifying? And you would never be like, what? Are you Christian Pulisic coming off the dude? He wears the number 10 shirt for Chelsea's Champions League winner. Like, no, we never would do that. He's our best 1v1 player. Like, why would we ever do that? And now here we are 11 games later, and everybody's like, you know what? Christian Pulisic might be better off the bench, which ultimately I think has a positive twist to it. But still, it's kind of negative as well that not to say that how far he's fallen or any of that crap, but that we are having that conversation against arguably one of the best players we've ever produced. Yeah, that's well said. I think my second one is scenario planning. We've talked about this a lot. I think this U.S. team does not do a good job of scenario planning, right? You said everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Isn't that your quote, Jimmy? Didn't you come up with that on your Well, I'm stealing it from Mike Tyson, who probably stole it from somebody else.
Yeah, that's the world that we're in now. It's all stolen from somebody else. But yeah, I think that scenario planning where we have a game plan, and you know what this was like, Jimmy. You've been through a lot of different coaches and meetings where you go, okay, well, if this, then that. And while we want to be the U.S., we want to be proactive. We want to be on the front foot. If you get scored on against Canada in the first 7 minutes of the game and you know that they're going to bunker in, you better have a game plan as to how you're going to now break them down, because the game has changed considerably, right? Matching up, them sitting back, whatever. Okay, maybe you're playing for that draw, but now you got to go out and find the game. Do we have enough ideas? Do we have enough scenario planning to say, okay, we're going to switch to back three, or here's where we're going to find gaps now to pull them in and out of spaces? I think we still lack a little bit of that reactionary. I think we're good at being proactive, but when that proactivity doesn't work out, our reaction to that is a struggle. Yeah, and just to kind of further that point, in-game management, I think it kind of falls under the same umbrella, right? And sometimes, and against Canada, I'll just use one example, and it's been talked about to death, but when we could have played forward, we decided to play back, and that was the time, like recognizing that time to go step on somebody's throat or when they're vulnerable is super important. And so that is something that obviously that needs to be addressed and would help us kind of turn some of these negatives into positives. And my last negative takeaway is kind of Captain Obvious stuff, but injuries. Now Tyler Adams gets hurt again. You know what kind of pissed me off about the Tyler Adams injury? I wish, again, now tying in my in-game management, if he knew he was hurt, I wish he would have got a yellow card, because he gets one more yellow card and he's got to sit a game. So if he's like, I'm hurt against Canada, go tackle somebody. Go tell the ref he's a dick or whatever, and go get that yellow so that you have to miss the El Salvador game or the Honduras game at home. And now we don't waste you for the next three things. That would have been proper in-game management. Now, obviously, I don't necessarily put that all on Tyler Adams, but something that should have been talked about at some point, like, hey, whatever. And then Chris Richards breaking his foot, Ricardo Pepi breaking his nose, Gio Reyna, that guy's fallen off the face of the map. I know apparently he's supposed to be starting or coming back into training on a more regular basis with Borussia Dortmund. They just wanted to give him this last window to get back to full health. He'll be a great addition back into the team. I'm sure he's itching to get back. So, and then Zach Steffen with these John Anthony Brooks back spasms. There's a lot going on here. Wait till you get my third glass half empty. Jimmy, injuries aside, playing time for this team, right? Mark McKenzie not playing, Timothy Weah not playing, Christian Pulisic not playing. You got a bunch of these guys coming out of their off seasons as well. You look at the midfield, Tyler Adams in and out of the team. Weston McKennie is finally playing a consistent run of games, and I'm excited about that. Yunus Musa not playing. So you take injuries and you take this playing time and you look 10 months down the line, you go, well, how much further along are we going to be if half or three quarters of our best players and our star players in our golden generation or pre-golden generation aren't playing at the clubs that they're at, where we were all excited 12 months ago because everybody was playing, but now we're in a little bit of this rut. Maybe that's what we're seeing in the team a little bit. We're obviously coming off of an off-season too for MLS players, but I'm worried about playing time for these guys in the development of them, right? 11 months is a lifetime in a career, especially for these young players. If they're not getting consistent minutes starting games, what kind of impact is that going to have on our national team? And then you take injuries into account and you go, man, it's I mean, that's very glass half empty, but it's a little dire.
That's a great shout. And also, remember the Timo Weah, like we didn't have his vaccination stuff sorted out, so he couldn't play in Canada. Like, how does that happen? Like that we didn't think that through for all of our players. And what was crazy is that Timo Weah would have helped us, I think, a lot in that Canada
big
game.
Time.
So, well, Heath, we're going to call it a show here, but I appreciate your positives and your negatives. There's a lot to get into, but we got to save some of it for the next U.S. Men's National Team Hour. I did.
You did it backwards, dude. No one wants to end
our
on this
beautiful
sour
faces
note,
make everybody feel good about themselves. Listen, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. So make sure you join us for the next U.S. Men's National Team Hour next Monday. Kicks off at 1:15 p.m. Pacific, 4:15 p.m. Eastern. It'll be me and Heath and potentially a special guest who might go by the name of Charlie Davies. We're working on that. Could see Chuck again. But we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for the support. So make sure you hit like and subscribe. Turn on your notifications if you like it in podcast form. Make sure you follow the Qué Golazo podcast on all the audio platforms and follow us on Twitter at Qué Golazo Pod. And, of course, tell all of your friends about the best show about the U.S. Men's National Team because it happens here on the Qué Golazo podcast. So on behalf of producer Des Norris and Hollywood Heath Pearce, I'm Jimmy Conrad. We'll see you next time. Later.